We're live. We just got the audio from back here, so it is what it is for this time. Yeah, next time we can do it a little bit different. Yeah.
Have you guys had any food before?
Oh.
You got something.
Yeah, Peter got some food for us. Oh yeah. Thanks, mate. Thanks for that. Everything. Everything.
Yes. Ah, okay. Sacamos español. Ah, bien, ¿verdad?
Thanks.
Yes. Okay. And you don't think next or puede ser que
Tube with water. You want a drink?
Estoy mirando. No, preguntan, si alguien quiere preguntar, se hizo la pregunta. Pero. Pues eso, encantada.
Ah. Ah. This. It's a bit late now. Yeah, that's the problem there. Output. I could stop the stream and change it, but I don't think so. I think they're about to start. Know what I mean? It'll just be kept in, whatever.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Design Sprinters Meetup, our last meetup of the year, with a small exception that we'll explain later. Well, we always start with what was the objectives of this group. Why did Andrea and I set it up almost a year ago? We'll have a look later at the retrospective of what this year has been for us, for the Design Sprinter group. But basically, we set up this meetup to foster a community of practice, have a group of people come together and share what they've been doing, what they're doing on design sprints, learn about each other, get some tips and tricks from each other, build a body of knowledge of how can we run design sprints better, and evolve and extend the design sprints method. So we always like to say that we're an open and friendly community. That means that everyone's included, whether you're an expert in design sprints, whether you've never you've never run any design sprint or even attended one, and just want to come and see what is this about. So feel welcome, and for that we have a code of conduct to make sure that everyone feels welcome. Andrew likes to summarize that with Andrew worth not being a dick. And apart from that, then you're welcome to come, share your opinions, and yeah, just have a good time sharing your knowledge about design sprints. We have a few places where we like to meet up. So we have a website that explains a bit more about our community. We have the Meetup group where we announce where are the next meetups and the next events that we're running. And we have the Twitter account. So if you want to follow that account, we sometimes publish some links or articles and things related to design sprints that might be interesting. This is tonight's agenda. So we're going to start with the welcome and a little bit of networking. Hopefully you had a little bit of time to do that. We're going to have a quick recap of how was Design Sprint Camp Sydney. So we ran Design Sprint Camp Sydney 2 weeks ago, something like that. So Andrew has brought some pictures and at least one surprise from that he will share today. Then we're going to have Stephen share what to expect when facilitating your design sprint and a few tips if it's for first-time facilitators. Things that he might not have expected and he learned from that experience. And after that, we'll open it up to Q&A, some questions and discussion. So I've been collecting, while you were here having drinks and networking, a few questions from other people that would like to run their first design sprint, which are some of the questions that they might have, or the first obstacles that come to mind to run your first design sprint, but also some tips from other facilitators. What was that surprised them the most the first time they ran a design sprint, and also what tips and tricks and learnings they also got. So we'll share that a little bit, and feel free to ask any questions and share your own tips as we go into the discussion. And then we'll have any other business and close if you have any shout outs, if you're hiring, or if you want to announce something. So you'll have some space afterwards. And now we want to start by thanking Vanguard, which was our sponsor for the event, for this venue, amazing views, and also for the food and the drinks. So Patrick, if you want to share just 2 minutes about this Vanguard.
Thanks, Elena. Welcome everybody to Vanguard Investments Australia. We've been here in Australia for over 20 years now. Our parent company is based in Pennsylvania in the US, where we were founded in 1975. We're one of the largest investment fund management companies in the world. We pioneered index investing, and essentially we have, I think, last count, almost $6 trillion under management, 33 million clients globally. We've 42 offices, probably 14, 15,000 what we call a crew. We have this whole nautical team around the ship, what we call our permanent staff crew. And yeah, so thanks very much for coming, and it's a privilege to host this design sprint session. Human-centered design and design thinking is something that Vanguard have only recently adopted. We have new ways of working. We've been doing Agile for 15 years. We've incorporated some lean practices, and now we're adding that missing piece to what I call the holy trinity of design thinking, lean, and Agile. So I'm intrigued and interested to see how this goes tonight. Vanguard have also, we're growing quite rapidly. We're out of this building in about 6 months. We're moving up to Exhibition Street. We've got lots of openings in cross-finance and IT. So whether you're a product owner, a BA, a full-stack developer, we're interested in talking to you. So, come talk to anyone in a black t-shirt afterwards if you're interested in knowing more about Vanguard, which is voted in the top 10 best places to work in IT in the recent Computer World survey. We do aim to be one of the best places to work. Thanks very much.
And now Andrew's going to tell us a little bit about how was design sprints.
Thanks, Elena. Thanks, Patrick. Listen, I thought I'd just give you guys a very quick update on how Sprint Camp in Sydney went. As you know, we ran the first of our Sprint Camp conferences in August here in Melbourne, which was a fantastic success. It was a really great day. And a lot of people came to us and said, we really need to try and bring this model, this concept, this model places. So we took it up to Sydney, and I thought you'd be interested in seeing how things in the other city went. And as Elena said, we had a couple of interesting things. Firstly, we pretty much replicated the original agenda from Melbourne. For those of you who didn't come to either of the events, we try and split it into two streams. One stream predominantly lightning talks and presentations. What we try and get the people to do is talk about case studies and experience of what they've actually been doing in running sprints, and where they've actually run sprints, the conditions they've run sprints. And we try to mix that up rather than just focusing on how a startup might embrace design sprints. We've actually looked at how you might try and bring a design sprint model into a larger organization. If you've got a richer product set, if you've got a more complex organization, you've got a set of mature products, how do you start bringing design sprints into that kind of environment? So we had a really good series of conversations about that. And in the afternoon we ran a mini sprint. So we peeled off about 30 of the attendees, split them into teams, gave them a sprint challenge, and gave them 3 hours to work their way through certainly the initial phases of a design sprint. And they were pretty successful doing it, and it was actually a lot of fun. And the other thing we actually finally I want to touch on is we had a global remote virtual sprint presentation. It was a mouthful. But what it actually is a bunch of guys who are around the world. Some of them are based on the West Coast in San Francisco, some in Dallas, some in New Jersey on the East Coast, some in Europe. One of the key leads was in Berlin. And they were live, interactive, showing us how you would remotely facilitate those kind of sprints. So they were showing us the current state of an actual live sprint where they were working simultaneously in all these different places around the world. So it was actually pretty interesting stuff. Their stream, as they live stream from around the world, so their stream will be adding to our YouTube channel along with the live stream from this evening. So we had a pretty full agenda. We did have a few people helping us doing it. I think for me, the people who came out most, of course, were the guys from Google. Elena kind of touched on it briefly, but our Meetup groups, by the way, are part of Google's Design Sprint Global chapter. In fact, we're the only group in Australia that's part of Google's Design Sprint chapters. And we were able to persuade the head of design relations from Google to fly out from San Francisco for the weekend just to speak at our conference. actually think these Google guys are crazy. It would do my head in actually flying in and flying out again. But two of them actually flew in from the US and literally spent Friday and Saturday and flew back on the Sunday just to speak at the conference. So those guys were pretty cool. And these guys were quite cool as well. They actually helped us a lot with the remote sprint stuff. So just some idea of some of the people who were helping us out in Sydney. Oh. I don't know if you're picking up this sound. So I don't know if you actually heard any of that because we couldn't get the sound to run. But we actually got Jake and John, who wrote the original sprint book, to cut a little video for us to introduce us to the conference. So again, I think what's really kind of cool about this, is, despite the fact that we, may think that we are in Melbourne or in Sydney, we're actually getting some pretty good links internationally into some of the leading lights of the design sprint, design thinking world. And Jake is now saying, come up with some ideas that persuade me to come down to Australia. So I think we have to work on that for next year. And just very quickly, I'm not going to dwell on this too long, some idea of what the event looked like. Plenty of people coming along. That was the crowds who came along. We had a tremendous time down at the mini sprint, the sprint jam. Again, we gave them the laundry app to work on, and we gave them a SKU. We gave them a very simple app to work on, which was do an on-demand laundry system. But we gave them a bit of a SKU. We said, think of one which might be for an elderly woman living alone on her own. How would you provide laundry services for that? How would you provide laundry services for someone who is homeless and sleeping on the street? So the guys were actually given, what on the surface might seem to be a relatively straightforward task to complete, but we gave it a bit of a twist and a kind of a social edge as well. Some great speakers. This is Kai Haley. He's Google's global head of design relations. That's Tom Richardson, who's Envision's Asia Pac MD. They very kindly came along to speak and talk about basically bringing design sprints into an enterprise environment. And just an array of other speakers as well, who all contributed pretty well for the event, and then ending up in an Ask Me Anything experts panel. And we got them all on stage. Mild confusion trying to get them to line up with their names on the presentation slide. But they're experts, so I'm sure they could have worked it out in the end. And Elena did mention earlier on that we've actually only been going for a year, and I found this kind of interesting. There's a worldwide design sprint Slack channel. It's actually run by Jake Knapp, and I came along and set up the Melbourne Design Sprint channel and said, hey, is there anybody out there in Australia who's kind of interested in design sprints? And a little while later, Elena came along and said, yeah, me, but I think we're the only ones who are interested. So it's kind of interesting to see how far we've gone in literally a year and a week from that first kind of exchange. So our first kickoff was here in Melbourne back in February. We've run quite a few of these. I've just picked some of the more interesting ones out. Case studies, finding the right sprint brief, sprint challenge, challenges during the design sprint. That was, how do you rescue a design sprint that's gone wrong? How do you pivot a design sprint when you get halfway through and you discover, crikey, I'm not sure this is going in the right direction. All the way through to this evening. How do you, what lessons are there from your first design sprint and how would you facilitate it? Along the way, we've set up, as well as the Melbourne group, we set up the Sydney group, and our last event was, of course, the Sydney conference. I should also say that you probably noticed as well while she was presenting that Elena and Carlos, in the intervening year as well, have actually been working on their own product development, if I can call it that. So that's a development which wasn't necessarily, I think, included in the design sprint plans, but anyway. So without any further chat, that was the conference up in Sydney. It was a fantastic day, actually. It worked very well. I think lots of people went away with a great understanding of design sprints. And I was actually it keyed for me into some of the things that Patrick was saying. Because what a lot of the people were doing is coming from a background of a lot of experience in UX, of using agile models for development. The dev teams are all running agile. And we're just beginning to embrace things like human-centered design and design thinking. And if nothing else, design sprints are a very pragmatic implementation of design thinking. It's taking a properly structured, fast route through a design thinking process that feeds straight into your agile dev teams at the end. So, on that note, I'm going to hand over to Stephen. It'll be 30 seconds to switch presentation platforms, and then we'll let Stephen come on.
Hello everyone, I'm Stephen. Cool. Yeah, thanks for coming along tonight. I'm going to be speaking about my first experience facilitating a design sprint. So let's get into it. Cool. So this is me. I'm Stephen. Didn't come out too well, but I obviously don't always dress like that. So I'm a UX designer at Venture IP Australia. So we're a hosting company. We do hosting, domain names, a whole bunch of digital services. So I guess at Venture IP, we do more of your usual UX design, things like user research, prototyping, user testing. So we never really got into things like design sprints, that type of way of working. So that's what got me interested in it. And just a bit of previous background, I've also worked as a front-end developer and a copywriter as well. So done a few different things, but always in the digital space. Cool. So what got me into design sprints? The first one was being able to validate ideas really quickly. So we've probably all had that experience where we've worked on a project for months or years in one of my cases, unfortunately, only for it to get into market and then didn't get the uptake or the reception we really wanted from it. So with design sprints, it's just such a faster way to validate your ideas. You can prototype something out and get feedback on it within just 4 days. So I really enjoy that aspect. And just a way to come up with so many great ideas as well. So if you went to a business owner and said, after the first day, we could come up with a whole 8 different ideas that could potentially change your business, a lot would be pretty happy with that. And basically that's what design sprints can do. You can come up with so many different ideas in just a couple of days. And it's such a collaborative way of designing as well. So as designers, we can sometimes be siloed away. I know in my team, sometimes we're just working away in a group of us, kind of locked away from the rest of the business. And so we don't really have that collaboration with marketing, with the management, with the developers. So it's a way to bring everyone together. You don't have to be a designer to take part in a design sprint. And finally, obviously, it's just a lot of fun as well. So doing your usual UX work, it can get quite, can be quite boring sometimes. So it's just a way of mixing things up. When you sit down at work in the morning at 9 a.m, you might not be coming up with all these different ideas, whereas a design sprint just does facilitate that, I suppose. Cool. So basically, as part of my ongoing development, I've ran some of these different groups in the past where basically I get a group of designers together and we come together to solve some problems. So this is what I did with this group here. We called ourselves the Design Sprinters. Very original, I know. So it was basically a bunch of volunteer designers, and we got together over 2 weekends. So there's 7 of us, and so we did it as well as our usual jobs. So it was a pretty full-on 2 weeks, but got there in the end. Cool, and just a bit of background story. So there's different types of design sprint formats. So because we're doing it over 2 weekends, we chose to do the 4-day design sprint. And obviously, I've just got a little disclaimer there. You don't have to do it, and you don't have to start on Monday and do it like that. I know a lot of different companies, they might run it in the afternoons, over 8 afternoons. Start it on Thursday, finish on next week. Cool, and just before we get into what problem we chose, just a little caveat as well about choosing your problem. So we did want to choose a problem that did actually have some impact and choose a problem that was worth solving. So one of our participants in the design sprint, they worked for a domestic violence charity. So our main challenge was about how do we get more support from the community to basically get more support to help out victims. And our long-term goal was in 2 years' time to raise an additional $200,000. So as part of our pre-research, we kind of realised there was a lot of awareness around domestic violence. So we really did want to focus on the actual action taking part. That's why we did have that concrete goal of an actual tangible result there. Cool. So here's my 20 and 20, because we all love lists, of course. Awesome. So kicking off is preparation really is key. So with design sprints, you can't just turn up on Monday and be like, okay, we're going to run a design sprint, let's go. You really do need to know about the process. So I would say just learn as much as you can about the actual process, all the steps, everything you're going to be doing beforehand. And there are so many resources out there. Go on YouTube, here's probably one of the best resources you can find, people in this room. So really do know the process beforehand and really study it. And if it's your first time, I'd say find a guide. There's a lot of different guides out there that basically run you through all the steps, basically minute by minute. So find one that resonates with you. There's a whole bunch, so yeah, choose one and follow it to a T. And also any pre-research about your problem you can do, obviously do that as well. So a lot of us didn't have experience in the domestic violence space. So basically did want to do some research beforehand, look at whatever solutions are already out there beforehand. Cool. Number 2, so a bit of administration. It's really just saying get yourself organised. We use Slack to basically herd everyone together. Obviously you choose whatever you want, but there is a lot of organisation beforehand. So especially if you are running it in a company, people are going to have to take a whole week off work. So you're going to want to get it well prepared in advance. And it's also just such a great way for us to share things between the days. So even after the days, we were still chucking ideas in there, just sharing resources. Cool. So don't skimp on your supplies. So unfortunately, design sprints probably aren't the most eco-friendly thing you can do. So you literally will run through so many different supplies. We would have gone through thousands of post-it notes in our time. And there's a few different things you'll need that you might not realise at the start. Some things that come in handy, things like clipboards, so you can go around and sketch, walk around, look at all the artifacts around the rooms. And also, just another thing on just preparation there, it's just you need a lot of space to put everything up as well. So obviously choose a room that has a lot of space. If you need to take down the paintings and stuff, that's fine. A lot of natural light helps. And once again, usually, say like the guide that we found had all these supplies already on it, so just stick with that. Don't go wrong. Awesome. So setting expectations at the start. There is so much work involved in a design sprint. You're basically, from the first time you start to the ending, you're completely flat out. There's just no time to really relax. So I guess you really, as a facilitator, you need to tell people that and basically set the expectation. We're going to be working really hard. We're going to be working fast, but that's what we're here to. We're here to work hard for the next 4 days. And just about setting the agenda. So I set the agenda at the start of the sprint, basically give an outline of the whole next 4 days, and then also just running through people what we're doing at the start of each day. I don't think a design sprint should be like a black box where people are guessing, oh, what's next we're going to do? Just be completely open about everything you're going to be running through over the next 4 days. And then just a couple of extra things you need to tell people about, such as the technology policy. The good thing about design sprints, you don't actually need to be using tech while you're doing it. There are a couple of activities you do need, but just reminding people, staff your phones, you don't need your laptops out. And then common courtesy goes a long way. We're all obviously adults, but just reminding to use your pleases, your thank yous, and just as a facilitator, if you can also encourage people to speak their minds, just participate as much as you can. Obviously, that's what we're all here to, work as a group together. Cool, so keeping things moving forward. As I said, there are a lot of different tasks over the next 4 days. It's quite easy to just go around and around in a circle. Sometimes you might get bogged down on a particular task. So that's really when the facilitator does need to jump in and just get things moving onwards. That might be a case of just even leaving what you're discussing right now and let's just continue onwards. And then it's obviously natural, we're all social people, that we're going to go off task. We might be chatting about what's been happening on the weekend. So I guess that's when you kind of do have to be the bad guy as the facilitator and just jump in and remind people just to stay on task. We do have a lot of things to cover, so just keep things moving. And also just a point on defining the tasks. So the first time someone hears something, it might just go in one ear, out the other. A lot of the tasks aren't intuitive as you might think. So it's a matter of just coming up with different ways to explain things. And then just give me a lot of examples as well. Like, so with the lightning demos, there's an example I basically was saying, these are the type of things you might want to go out and look for. And that obviously helped a lot. Awesome, so adjusting on the spot. So if you think things are going to run perfectly the first time round, it's definitely not. There's always going to be things coming up. People will be late. You might even get a couple of no-shows. So if you do run over time, obviously you do have to make that up elsewhere. It's not a case of just, we're going to run it until 7 o'clock tonight. So you do have to take that time from other activities. So the next activity you might have to cut it short a little bit. My one thing I'd advise on is not to take time away from the breaks. So as I've said, there is a lot of work. You definitely don't want to be, just working through lunchtime if you do need that break. And also just adding a buffer around different activities. So you might say we're going to work until 2 o'clock, but you have built in that extra 5 minutes just to have things wrapped up. Things are never going to go until 2 o'clock. People always need a few more minutes to get things sorted. Cool, so keeping tabs on the energy in the room. So as a facilitator, you kind of just have to watch what's happening in the room. If people are getting tired, it is fine to take a break. No one has to run, you don't have to run through your schedule minute by minute. That kind of goes with being on a roll as well. So one of the times during the sprint, we were on a roll, everyone was working well, and we decided to just go half an hour into our lunch. And everyone was keen. We just did half an hour lunch that day. Didn't want to stop while we're on a roll. And once again, if you see frustration creeping up in the room as a facilitator, that's kind of when you have to jump in there and work your magic. Awesome. So getting help with facilitating. So when I was doing it, I was the facilitator and I was taking part in all the activities as well. So it is quite a tough role to be doing both. And I suppose if I was to do it again, which in the future when I do it again, I'd probably just be the facilitator or just be taking part as one of the design sprinters. So if you are going to take part in both facilitating and the activities, I'd say just get someone to help you out. This is Brendan, bit of a shout out to Brendan, who helped with facilitating there. Cool, and trusting the system. So when you're going, especially if it's your first design sprint, everything might not make sense at the start. You might be questioning yourself, why are we doing this activity? Especially if once you have come up with your solution, you might be so keen just to jump in and start prototyping. You've got your idea all sorted, why bother with this next stuff? But I'd say just definitely stick to the path. If you have run a lot of different design sprints, maybe that's when you can start to pick and choose some things and change it up. But if it's your first time, just stick to the process, don't deviate from it. And I've just got there, it is all going to make sense when you do get to the end of it. Awesome. So number 10, snacks. In my opinion, this is the most important slide there is. So obviously it's important to keep the energy up in the room. I think people aren't used to working in the design sprint format. It can be really draining. If you come from just sitting at your desk, prototyping for 8 hours, then doing a design sprint, it can be quite full on. Plenty of snacks. Keep well stocked with coffee and all that. Cool. 11. So always to return back to the sprint challenge. Obviously you're there to solve a problem. It's easy when there's so many different ideas being thrown out there. It's quite easy to be looking at all the different shiny ideas and, wow, I've never thought of that. Let's start doing that. But you actually are there to solve a particular goal. And so our goal was to raise an extra $200,000. So at one time we started talking about doing an analytics platform for the charity. Where basically it was going to record, it was going to be a CRM, it was going to record data, why people gave. It was really going to do everything. And it was a great idea. It would have been a good solution, but it wasn't actually going to lead to that extra $200,000. It might have in the long run, but not in that 2-year period. So that's when we basically did have to change up our idea. We were going, like I said, down the analytics platform, but we started focusing on something that was more, that would lead to that $200,000. And so our solution we went for was basically taking gamification to the donation process, where when you donated, we'd give you a badge. That badge would be used throughout all your communications. If we send you an email, you'd have your badge. If you donated again, you'd upgrade your badge. We'd give you a badge for giving information about why you donated, things like that. So that leads me on to number 12. So not be afraid to pivot. So if we stuck down that, we were going down the analytics route, and we did have to pivot into the gamification idea. And I think it was definitely the right choice. I'd say don't be so dogmatic that this is the idea we chose. We have to stick with it right now. It's all right to change. We did pivot, and I think it was worth it in the end. Awesome. So getting into the later stages of the design sprint, this is about prototyping. So with the user testing, you're really there to test your main idea, your main assumption, and so you only have one day to make the prototype. And I'll just say only really prototype the big idea that you're actually testing. So this was one of the pages where you chose how much you were going to donate. And we originally had the idea, there was a lot of stuff on this page where it was where your money's going to be going, what other people in your area have donated, all this stuff. But this is not actually the part we were testing. If you recall, we're testing the whole gamification idea, things like the badges. So we really just did strip out all the unnecessary stuff. You only have a day, so it's not the prototype's not going to look great either. This is just, quickly whipped up wireframes. Cool, and so getting everyone involved with prototyping. So in your design sprint group, everyone might not be a digital designer if you're going down that route. But everyone can take part. So while we were designing, we had people that were basically sketching out ideas, and so I was the one doing the prototyping, and basically a group of people were just sketching out ideas, pass them over to me, and I could quickly whip them up without actually making those design decisions. So while everyone wasn't actually clicking the mouse, they were able to do the prototype. And we also had people writing copy and then passing it on. Someone was doing graphic design, designing up those badges. So if someone does have a particular strength, obviously use that strength. And the other thing we were doing was writing our script for the next day. And I'd say this is hugely important. This is one thing I actually screwed up. On the testing day, I guess I was a little bit arrogant, thinking that I would just not go off the script. And the first one was pretty horrendous. I found myself asking a lot of close-ended questions and stuff. I guess I panicked. So then we actually did revert back to a script, and that went a lot smoothly from there. So with testing, I'd say we basically had our design sprint at the library at the dock, and on the fourth day we actually hadn't planned who our testers were going to be. We kind of had the idea, we're at a library, people are there on a Sunday, we're just going to go out and find people. And so we did, we got some blocks of chocolate, and we basically headed out into the library, and it worked pretty well. We were able to, within the first couple of minutes, we had all our testers, and they were all pretty keen. So I'd say with your testing, don't be afraid to get a little bit guerrilla style. Maybe if you're in a big organisation, this might not be possible, but if you're a startup or something, just be creative, grab people off the street, get anyone to test your prototype. So moving on to after testing, and so that's with the retrospective. Basically, the design sprint doesn't end with the last test. There's actually a lot you can learn with the retrospective. So this is actually one of the most important things that we did, and we're just able to get a lot more ideas generated after. For example, one of the ideas was people were saying that if the badges were a competition, that's when they would buy into them a lot more. So we were leading on to ideas such as we could team up with companies to run this whole who can raise the most money, get the most participation from the community. So I guess what I'm getting at is that you can continue generating ideas afterwards. Don't just do your last user test and be like, okay, do we continue, do we not? Just keep on going. You can always improve the prototype and idea from there. Cool. So the beauty with design sprints, it's basically all made up of a lot of small tasks. And I'd say you don't have to do an entire 4-day or 5-day design sprint to get the benefits from it. So just some of my favourite ones were the Crazy Eights, where you basically sketch out an idea 8 different times, and it's just such a great idea to get the creative juices flowing. And things like heat map voting, where you put a lot of sticky notes on something that you like as opposed to just putting one. Things like that just can add a lot of fun into your general work life. You don't have to do a whole sprint to do heat map voting. And then the lightning demos as well. I just found that such a great way to look at what other people are doing, different solutions that are out there. Cool. So working together just works. We've probably all been in that situation where the most senior person in the room kind of gets their way, or the person that has them is the best at persuading everyone gets their way. So with a design sprint, you're actually all working individually. You go off and come up with ideas by yourself, and then you come back as a group. And also the whole democratic way of choosing ideas as well, how everyone's voting on different ideas, I think that generally leads to the best ideas actually do coming to the top, not the person that's the most senior and my way's the highway type character. You probably will know a couple of those. Awesome. And another huge takeaway was, so design sprints aren't really about your finished prototype. Obviously, you're probably just going to chuck it in the bin anyway because you made it in a day. But you're really testing that actual idea, and you're really getting alignment from the team. So that's everyone. Now you've got everyone on the same bike, riding in the same direction. And so it's really just a way of, do we get everyone on board to move in this direction, or maybe the design sprint was not a fail because you're always going to learn things from it. Yeah. Cool. And number 20 is thinking big. So it's you're only giving up 4 days of your time. So I'd say if you get to the end of your 4 days and what you came up with didn't really work, you didn't actually lose that much time in the grand scheme of things. It's not like you built a whole product and got it to market, and that's when you realised. So I'd just say, if you're going to do it, just aim for the fences. This is probably, so to give you a bit of story about our the user testing, the whole gamification idea was a bit of a flop, to be honest. Just because I think people didn't really want to be playing games with such a touchy subject, I suppose. The problem was so much higher, so much bigger than you getting a badge and sharing that badge on social media. But yeah, that's absolutely fine. I think if we were going to do it again, we probably would have aimed for doing something more innovative. It's probably a bit of a cliche, just taking gamification and adding it onto any industry. So yeah, that's basically my 20 and 20. Thank you. Follow me on LinkedIn.
Let's open up for some questions. Do you guys have some questions for Stephen? Thanks, Stephen. You've gone through some of your takeouts. What are some of your, pitfalls that you would say we should look out for? You've obviously run a number of these.
Yep.
What would you say we should?
I would say probably the biggest pitfall is that you're always going to get people that might not play ball as much as you want. We had a lot of kind of people just going around in circles, a lot of off-topic talk, and I think it might be bad to say, but when you give someone like a voice to say whatever they want, some people can go on for forever. So it's just a case of, even though it is a way, just keeping everyone on topic, I suppose, and keeping everyone together, not starting to say, well, actually, let's have another look at this idea over here. We kind of have already agreed as a group to go down this particular path. So I suppose it's always going to be the human element. That's the major pitfall.
question. I'm wondering if there is any, if you have an ideal number of how many people or librarians should participate in the design sprint.
So we had 7 people, and I think that was pretty good. But as I mentioned earlier, I was doing the participating and doing the facilitation as well. So I think with that number, you just want to be the full-time facilitator. If you had maybe 5 people and you have done a few design sprints before, that's when you probably could participate and facilitate at the same time. So obviously, and if you had a bigger number, maybe you could have a couple of facilitators. So, yeah. I think generally what I've heard is between 5 and 8. Yeah,
Hi. You suggested redefining some tasks in different ways if people were struggling with them. What were some of those? Give an example of anything that people were struggling with?
Yeah. I mentioned the lightning demos. So basically, at first it was kind of, just go off and do whatever you want. You got half an hour to play on your phone. People didn't really know what they're actually searching for. That's when things like, an example I gave was we could look at PayWave, like as a way for people to donate in a different way to charities. So just giving people examples like that, where it's completely has nothing to do with donations.
Great. Another question.
Hey Steve, thanks for sharing your journey with us. If you were to do it all again, what would you change this time around if you do a second sprint?
So I think it wouldn't be so much changing too many things. It's more of everything would run more smoothly. So when I was doing it for the first time, I had never done any of those things before. So even in my head, I was thinking like, how do I come up with the best way to present this? And also participating in the activities as well. Your mind's in 2 different places. So I guess just knowing the framework better as well, having more experience of what all the tasks are. Having to remind myself beforehand, quickly going over through the notebooks, this is what we need to do, So everything would just run more smoothly if I did have a bit of knowledge of the whole process.
Thank you. What about if you were to run your next one within your work environment, as opposed to with your friends at the weekend in the library? Would you do anything different there?
Oh, good question. So I have pitched to do a design sprint at work, and I think the main blocker was not having that big problem that we can't really come up with a solution with. So I suppose it would be finding that big idea that kind of does need tackling.
How would you do that? How would you find it?
Yeah. Well, maybe one solution to that would be if we've tried other approaches already and those have failed, maybe we do need to go at a different angle for it.
Another question.
It's more to answer the last question. So, here at Vanguard we had I actually came across this process by accident. We had a project where we weren't quite sure how we were going to run it, and I found this design sprint process is a perfect way to take a step back, figure out, get a common understanding in the room, map out the process, and then that allowed us then to hone in on the area that we wanted to focus on next. So you can run it in a big enterprise company like Vanguard. It is a bit harder. You have to do a lot of planning up front. You have to give a lot of people notice because you're taking 4 or 5 days out of their busy schedule. You probably only need about 3 or 4 people there to do the whole time. You can invite subject matter experts in for certain parts of that, where you kind of interview people to help map out the process. But the key challenges, I think, is getting people on board, getting their time, and also booking meeting rooms for 4 consecutive days, I think, is pretty hard as well.
I also have a question for you. What surprised you the most? Like, there's a difference between the theory and the practice. So, from what you read on the book and the method, from that to running your first design sprint, what would you say was the thing that surprised you the most?
Probably my biggest surprise is maybe just I was just so impressed at what people can actually come up with. Just when like looking at the different 8 solutions that we came up with, we probably could have prototyped out any one of those. So just I was so impressed with I guess the process you go through, what you can actually create. I went in it not really knowing what to expect myself, and that whole aspect of it, the idea generation, was really impressive.
Okay, more questions?
So in Jake's book, he has a role of a decider. Did you choose not to have that, or you just purely democratize the process?
Yep.
How did you come up with those situations?
Yeah,
It was kind of
one thing I actually missed out of the talk was that one of the participants worked for a domestic violence charity. So she was in the marketing team there. So she was the decider of that. Yeah.
I'm not sure whether you would have come across this in the design sprint that you just had, but say in the instance of tension or where people are emotionally, like they start to become closed off, maybe their idea didn't get chosen or some sort of conflict. I guess one question would be, how would you handle that? And the second question would be, do you think it would involve a facilitator or internally within the team that would be best at handling that?
So we did have that problem with our analytic platform, where we did want to basically do everything, and so one of the not throwing under the bus or anything, but the person that was the decider, she did want a solution that did encapsulate everything. This is her chance to really take something back to her company. Look what we came up with. Is this. That's when I kind of had to remind everyone we're just here for 4 days, and we do actually have to prototype this and test it as well. This solution that does all these things it's definitely beyond the scope of this one sprint. So it was a case of reining it in, and other people were obviously on board with that as well. It was a group decision to say let's just focus on one little aspect, and we can obviously work in the future as a team to come up with these other things.
Right. Just on some of the tasks that you mentioned, besides Jake's book, what do you think are the best knowledge resources to actually learn about those tasks or the general process?
Yep. So a really handy resource was AJ and Smart have a lot of YouTube videos, and they basically did a YouTube video of every single task broken down. And that wasn't actually the particular format that I followed. So I found another guide, but just being able to see those 2 guides together kind of did even help me understand things better. Just to be able to frame things differently. So looking at multiple different guides, I suppose, you're always going to get a better understanding. But yeah, check out Asian Smart, all their videos. Go on.
Yeah, just to add something to that as well as the AJ and Smart stuff, Google themselves have an online resource. It's called the Design Sprint Kit. And if you go in there, there's got all of the entire Google methodology, plus a whole series of very short, very snappy guides on how some of the individual techniques work. But Steve is spot on. There's quite a few things out there, both YouTube videos and kind of resource libraries that you can find a pretty rich source looking around. We'll try and share some of them at the end of this as well, because We're part of the Google Design Sprint chapter, and so we kind of not just use their resources, but try and feed back into it as well as people actually deploy it, like Steve and some of the others.
If there is any videos missing or any activities that you would like to know more, we can pass on that feedback and see if they can create those resources as well. One that I particularly think it's always hard for me to explain is like how might we. I don't know if you found in your design sprint that people have trouble understanding the how might we, but it is usually one that gets a few people puzzled and try to explain it in different ways and still kind of it is a little bit harder.
Yeah, I think maybe we were a little bit lucky that most of us were UX designers, so we kind of had seen that before, but definitely, well, once again, we did have to go through a couple of examples of how might we's that we're going to be writing. So even just always giving examples is really great.
Sounds good. Any other questions? Before we wrap up, I think it will be interesting as well if you guys, anyone in the audience, if you guys have run your design sprint, if you want to share as well, what was your main takeaway? What was the thing that surprised you the most from running that first design sprint? Or what was your biggest tip or learning after that? It will be great. And just to break the ice, I'm probably going to ask Andrew to be the one to share. If you want to share, what was the thing that surprised you the most or you learned the most in that first design?
Yes, I think the thing I took away most the first time I went through was not to expect a kind of black and white answer at the end. You do your design sprint, and I somewhat foolishly, I think, went into it thinking what I'm going to get is, a very clear answer from the user test at the end. And in fact, what we actually got was something in the middle. The people that we used for our user test neither said this is the best thing since sliced bread, nor did they say it's the worst thing I've ever seen. It was, much more nuanced. It was, well, we like this part of the app, but we absolutely hate this bit. We didn't understand this bit, but that bit seems quite intuitive. And so the thing I took away from that, and the surprise I had, was that you do need to iterate at the end of a sprint to smooth out some of the wrinkles. And in fact, I'm sure if you had more time and if you were doing it in a kind of more kind of corporate environment, I'm sure your guys would have iterated through to finesse the output from the prototype to end up with something that you feel is much more rounded and they can take to your dev teams. The output from the sprint is still a prototype, and it still needs to be kind of worked on. And I think that was the thing that, speaking personally, that was one of the most revelatory pieces for me.
I think that's one of the things that people talking about design sprints don't share, but the outcome is, I've seen a diagram that I think Case, the Design Sprint Academy from Google has made that says it's a total success and that idea has potential. It's a total failure and you learn that it's not worth investing in that idea. But there's also a middle ground, which is like, there might be something there, but you need to iterate and maybe run a second sprint or another sprint to see how that evolves and how that there is something there, but it's not quite clear yet. So yeah, that's a really good point. Anyone else want to share?
This is actually more of a question. I guess in general with projects and whatnot, sometimes we talk about budgets and time and constraints and whatnot. How is that tied to design sprint where you actually have 4 days or 5 days to actually design something, and whatever that you actually come out at the end of the day might be fantastic, but it takes ages to actually develop. So the effort of actually developing doesn't quite make sense. So how does that go?
You want to take a stab at that?
Yeah. I'd say maybe that's just a case of having to rein in what you're going to build, and so you might have to cut out some of those features that you don't necessarily need. And also, potentially getting people from development involved in the design sprint as well. And obviously don't want them to be saying, oh, we're not going to build that, not going to build that because it's going to take so long. But just being able to give some insight into what things are going to take long, what's actually quite easy to build.
Yeah, I just actually back up what Stephen said. I think it's all about being aware of the scope of the challenge going in. So spending some time prior to the actual sprint itself, working through what the scope of the challenge that you're taking is going to be. And then actually once you're going through the sprint, having the decider or whoever has the role of making the decisions choose the part of the solution that you're going to take forward to prototype and then take on to develop. It's actually a super interesting question because it's not a kind of black and white answer. It's one of those things that it's very nuanced, and it's one of those things with a bit of experience you get to be able to track and say, as you would in an agile development environment, this one's too big, this one's too small, this is just about right. It's finding that kind of Goldilocks model, if you like, that is just right to be able to take through to prototype, and then is the right size to take to a product, so that they can work into the build team, so that they're actually building it properly. It depends on all sorts of things: the maturity of your build teams, the maturity of your UX people. But again, it's a kind of progressive scope of most things are.
Yeah, I think it also depends on which type of design sprint, if it's a forward thinking or more exploration of the next 2 years versus if it's a design sprint of something that team needs to build in a specific time frame. Usually when we define the challenge in the workshop that we did to define the design sprint challenge, we included in there any one part of the design sprint statement was the constraints. So the constraints is what is the time frame, like we need something to do this or solve this problem to be launched in the second quarter of this year or built in 6 weeks. If we already know you have that constraint, I would put it up front so that the whole team kind of gets into that mindset that, okay, whatever the ideas that we come up during this process and we test need to fit into that constraint as well. Not easy though. Any other people want to share?
Yeah, I would say, I think it's an important process to go through when you're embarking on a new project. Even if you're creating a project brief for a project, maybe you want to go through this process to make sure that you're focused on the right things. This is a good way to test that before you pitch for a bigger investment. A lot of you are probably familiar with the term MVP. I think it's one of the most misunderstood terms out there. A lot of companies, they think MVP is what's the minimum product that we can actually release to market. Well, in actual fact, it's what's the smallest thing that we can build in the least amount of time to test our biggest risk or assumption. And the design sprint process allows you to do that. I think, as Steve and Andrew and Elena have alluded to, not you won't always get the perfect outcome at the end in terms of what you're going to build or prototype, at the end. But I think actually going through the whole process itself is a very useful exercise. I was very nervous at the start when I ran my first one. I thought, I'm going to get killed here if I waste all these people's time and we don't come out with something valuable. But I think everyone was really enlightened by the process. It gave them new techniques that they could take and use in their day-to-day jobs. The how might we note-taking is a perfect example that you can use in meetings to capture, where there's multiple conversations going on. You can sort of say, hold on, just capture that thought as a how might we. It saves everybody trying to minute take. And it also, it allows you to reframe problems and that you're hearing in the room as potential challenges, which you could run a whole design sprint process to even delve even further. It's also a good way of, getting on the same page and sharing a common understanding of a project if you feel that it's a bit overwhelming and you don't know where to start from, or what's the thing we should actually focus on first. Yeah, so definitely it's really worth going through. I recommend it before actually embarking on any software build. You run a design sprint, and that will give you an indication of what you should focus on next.
Nice. Everyone else, someone else want to share biggest learnings on the first design sprint they ran? No? Yeah?
Mine's more a bit of a question than a comment again, because I've run a few design sprints in my previous organisation where I worked as part of a really well-established design team. It's a bit like that, you know. I now work in a less mature design team I work for Melbourne Water, traditional engineering government organisation, and I know in my heart that design sprints will work. That's what you were just saying there, just to test ideas, you know, cheaply and quickly. But I've never had to sell the idea of design sprints before, because in my previous organisation it was just a given, we did them, it was fine. How do you sell them to people that don't know or don't care, or are slightly scared about things like design and testing and prototyping and all of those words?
You can take a stab at that.
Yeah, I think you know, obviously you can, if it's a business stakeholders, you can say, well, how many projects have you been involved in, software projects that you've built and they failed and you cancelled because they haven't hit the mark? How much does that cost you? And then you kind of think, well, you know, what if I could promise you that we can go through this process, we can test something cheaply, it won't cost you much, and it'll give us an idea of whether we should continue, pivot, or just totally scrap it.
We also had one of the first meetups that we ran. Nicole was talking about how do you sell design sprints. I think that presentation should be on our website if you want to have a look. But she had really good tips in terms of maybe start small and do 1 half days. I think she managed to get 1 half days during the week, and then sell, quantify the value of that and how the sales went up of that product after that. And then I think she had really good tips on the water cooler conversations, like making sure that other people in the organization hear about the design sprint was going on and they wanted to be part of it. So kind of creating some buzz around it and what was happening in that room and making it visible. And all of that helped with the return of investment in how do you run, how do you kind of go from the first one, then it was easier to run the second one, and it was then easier to run the next ones. Sounds good.
I'm just going to add a wee bit to what everyone said so far, because they're all great tips on trying to promote the design sprint to a kind of management level. But what was very interesting about the conference in Sydney was this is one of the big discussion points around how do you take design sprints into different organizations with different levels of UX maturity. Some people have got a very mature UX organization where they understand the tenets really well. Some are really kind of very early in the whole design piece. And I think the kind of consensus that came out was that the benefits that come out from doing design sprints are often around the kind of soft things. They're around getting agreement on what the problem should be. They're around getting alignment on what the process might be. And so there was a tremendous amount of work that went into, I should say, a tremendous amount of discussion around what these kind of benefits might be that you could sell upwards. And they were all around getting people on board, making sure everybody had their say in what the problem was going to be and also what the solution would look like, and getting that kind of alignment. And that came over very loud and clear from people in Sydney who've been running design sprints, their experiences in the early days, what the kind of benefits they're able to show in their organisations. As well as the hard numbers, like releasing the products and getting sales through the door, is actually around getting the organisation behind the idea up front. So I don't know if that helps. But
last opportunity if you want to ask something or share your experience as a first-time facilitator. If not, we'll put our hands together to thank Stephen. And with that,